Hello, I just wanted to show you this dress I've bought. It just came from a charity shop, so I'm just going to get that and start measuring it out and cutting out my pattern. So I've got all my pieces cut out. I cut it out of that lovely dress. I've got my skirt, I've cut it out, and then I've folded over my double seam and I've pinned it all the way along. We've got the two bodice pieces for the front of the bodice and the two pieces for the inside, so that's your front and these are your two sides, and I've just pinned them here, here, here and here, and I'm just going to sew straight across all of those. Don't forget, if you have one, it's a good idea to use your quilting foot, which has only got a 1/4 inch. That just helps you to line it up. If not, I don't know if you can see that little mark there on the edge, that's the 1/4 inch mark on my machine. So you could just measure up where a 1/4 inch from the hole in the middle to the line is, and then just sew it across. So I'm going to just start you off just to see. So I put it under that foot, remove my pin, and I'm going to just sew down across, but putting a few stitches in. And then I'm going to press my back stitch, and it'll just do a few back stitches, so that will stop your stitches from unraveling as you're putting them on and off. So here we have our two bodices. This is the lining and this is the outside. So what we're going to do now is I've taken the iron and I've just gently pressed these two seams open. So now we're going to pin our arms onto our bodice. So what we want to do is to fold the arm piece in half, and we're going to fold it down that center piece there, and I'm going to put a pin just in here to mark where my center of the arm is. And then we're going to take our bodice, the front piece, not the lining, and we're going to place this pin here so it is sitting in that seam on the bodice, just like that. So you're going to slide that pin out and pop it into there. Now very carefully, because this is very slippery fabric, we're going to come around very slowly, take our time and pin all the way around here. Now if you're concerned about doing this bit, because this is a little bit fiddly, what you can do is put a row of tacking stitches across this, and then once you've done your sewn your other piece to it, you can take those tacking stitches out. So I'm going to just show you how to do that. We're going to do the same as we did when we did the skirt. We're going to put it on to number 7 here. So I'm just going to move my thing over to here. Now you might have one here, or you might have your things here, but you just basically want the longest stitch you can get in that same straight stitch. I'm just going to come around and take my time, keeping it on that 1/4 inch. So I'm going to move my foot around as I do it, and I'm going to go really, really slowly with this. Don't put a back stitch in if you're just doing a tacking stitch, because it won't pull out properly if you've got that in there. And remember to move your pins out as you go. So this is just a stitch to hold it in place. And I think if you are using a little bit more delicate fabric like we are here, which is a bit slidey and moves around a little bit, this does tend to help. Also, make sure that you don't get any lumps by keeping your fabric straight like so. Keep smoothing it down. So I've gone ahead and I've pinned all the way down here, all the way around here, along this piece here and down. So I'm going to take it now to my machine, and very slowly and very carefully I'm going to go a 1/4 of an inch on that 1/4 inch foot and sew all the way around and down there. So I've got it under my foot and I've got it lined up with that 1/4 of an inch mark there. I'm just going to very slowly go around, remembering to do a back stitch as we go on. So I've done a few stitches on, a few back stitches, and then I'm going to go all the way around. Just be careful to take your pins out as you go. Oh, and I'm going to have my needle in the down position, so that when it stops moving it'll stay in the down position, and that enables you to turn it. So I need, as you can see, I've got too much this end, so I'm just going to move that a bit more. There we go. Okay. And mine might be a little bit harder because I'm going to go through some sequins which I've got on the front of mine. But if you're just using a plain fabric with yours, which I would suggest a polycotton or a cotton, then you'll probably find that that'll go through easier. And as you go around, just slowly take those pins out, and very slowly, whilst that needle's in the down position, that is the time to move it. Otherwise you might get a jagged stitch if you try and move it without having that needle in the down position. Take your pin out. You see how really slowly I'm going around, making sure I get my foot on that line all the time. As you can see, this fabric is moving around all over the place. And I'll do a few back stitches, and there we go, and that's the piece done. So I've gone ahead and I've pinned my arm now. This will be my armhole. My sleeve is in here, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So that's one side, this is going to be the other side. So here is the sleeve, and here is going to be the lining inside, and that is the front of your bodice. So what we're going to do is fold up that sleeve so it's all laying flat inside, and you want to be able to get it so that you can get this piece into a round shape. Okay, you don't want it too crunched up. And then what you can do is take a pin and just hold this in place at the back. Put your pin so that it's facing downwards, so that when you come, once it's all stitched together, you can just pull that pin out. Okay, remember this is just my tacking stitches on here, which we'll pull out later. Okay, and then we'll do the same on the other side. Just put that pin just in there, just to hold that place, so it's facing the bottom of your work. Now, if you're careful, you can get away with just doing that, but if you want to, you can pop another pin just in here to make sure that we don't stitch any of this fabric here into the seam. We don't want any of these bits. Can you see these bits bunching up? We don't want them going into that seam. And then we're going to bring across our lining, and we're going to work away. If you have a look, you'll find that there's another seam there, so I want to put this seam and nestle it into that seam there. Can you see those two seams? So there's a seam there, look, and a seam there, and I want those together, but I want to make sure that that's laying flat underneath it. And I'm going to put my needle in, going down the fabric like that, and that should keep that reasonably flat along there. Okay, and then we're going to go along here now. Can you see the edge? It's quite hard to see. There's two edges there. I want to make sure that one's touching there. Okay, so all the way along I want to make sure it's touching. Now this obviously is a curve of the opposite direction to that curve, so we're just going to go around and very carefully put our pins all the way in. And this is one of the most important bits of getting it straight. Oh, I just stabbed myself. Be careful with the pins, they're sharp. There we go. And that one there in the end. Yeah, so if you get this nice and flat, this is worth taking the time and just getting that laying nice and flat without that bit coming in from inside. It's a bit fiddly, but if you just take your time, you will get there. And that last one will come in, and all your ends there should meet together like so. There we go. We're going to do exactly the same as we did with going around here. We're going to very slowly go across here, making sure that all those stitches, all those layers stay together and stay neat. Okay, and just get that piece there, and just, you know, take your time and fiddle with it until you think it's right. If it doesn't look right, you know, go back and sort it. And then we're going to do a few back stitches. There we go. And then I'm going to remove my pin. And we're going to just come around very slowly, keeping that on that edge. Take my pin. And you see here, look, I don't want any bunching up of the fabric, so I'm just smoothing it out as I'm going around, making sure that that piece there is still staying where I want it. And this is the tricky bit now, because this is where all the fabric is. So I'm wanting my needle not to go through that sleeve. If you put your finger there, you can feel where that fabric is. And you want to make sure that that doesn't come over near where this piece of the arm is. Now this is getting quite bunchy, so once I've got this pin out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just lift my foot, move it around a bit, and then pull my fabric so it's coming in a nicer line. It's not going to go anywhere because that needle is stuck in that fabric there, and then just going to come down very slowly. There we go. If you pinned it okay, it shouldn't catch that fabric. Pull it a bit and get that flat. That's better. Oops, not too fast. I'll just take my time with this. If it has gone wrong when you take it out and you do have your sleeve cut, you can always unpick that piece where the sleeve is stuck inside and just go back. You can either hand sew it back, or you can take it back to the machine again. And there we go, a few back stitches at the end. Okay, and that should, as you can see, that's all laying nicely in there. So here is our bodice. Now what I want to do is just take those pins out, which I popped inside. Okay, because I don't want to stab myself whilst I'm working. So I'm just going to take those ones out, feel around. So nothing else in that one. There's one there. Let's see which end is it. Yeah. I'm just going to take those pins out. Okay, and then what I'm going to do next, you'll think, what am I doing this for? I think I've showed you on the other dress. To make sure, as you can see, this is all bunching up. To make sure this lays flat when we actually put it on to the dress, what we're going to do is take our scissors. Hopefully you can, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Can you see where the blue line is on there? I'm going to snip just up. Oh, sorry, there's a sequin there. Might have to use the end. There's some sequins on mine, so I'm going to have to be very careful. I'm going to snip just up to there. Okay, and I'm going to do that every like quarter of an inch all the way around. Okay, that's it. Now can you see, I don't want to cut over those stitches. If I cut over those stitches, I'm going to make a hoe, so I need to keep my cut above those stitches there, making sure I don't cut over those stitches. If you do cut over the stitches, don't panic. What you can do is just take it back to your sewing machine and run the machine just along that line over the top, and that will help hold it nicely together. Okay, usually what you should be able to do is just come along with your scissors, and if you've got a nice pair of dressmaking scissors, you just should be able to snip. Okay, so, and you snip as close as you can to that line without going through it. Alright, and you're going to do that, and then when you get to the corner here, you're going to cut that corner off nice and close, but not right on the stitches. Okay, so you've just got a tiny bit of fabric like that, so just go all the way around there and all the way around this arm piece. So what I'm going to do is put my forceps through my bodice piece here, and I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to take a lump of this fabric and I'm going to clip it into place. And I've got that in between the blades of the forceps there, and then very gently just going to pull my dress through. Now just take your time with this. You don't want to rip the fabric by pulling too hard. It will come out. It's just going to be a matter of time getting it out. And you can undo your forceps and then take another piece further down and pull that out as well, and just keep going at it just gently, and eventually it'll all just start coming through like that. And we're going to just, oh, I'm holding on to the piece which I'm pulling. So there we go. Okay, so that's that part, and then we're going to do exactly the same again. So I've got my little bodice here now. It's all coming together. Now take your forceps, because they've got a nice blunt end, and place them inside and push that corner up there, because you want a sort of square point on that corner. Okay, like so. Alright, and then what you can do if you want to is just to take that to the iron and press those little bits down. So what I should have said is that you don't need to use forceps. To do that, you can pop a pair of tweezers through and pull it through quite easily as well. You can also use a knitting needle and push the fabric through, and I believe there is a thing for making spaghetti straps which you sort of pull through, and that will help you sort of get that through that hole. But the problem being is you only got that very small piece of fabric there, and that's why there is a slight problem with getting it through. That's the space you've got to pull all that fabric through, so it's quite small, but it does go through eventually. Just take your time. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is just to pin my sleeves together like that. Okay, and then I'm going to put a row of stitches just across, and I'm going to stop when I get to this piece here. Okay, you don't want to go any further than that. Just make sure when you're doing your arms that those two pieces there are touching. You want that to come across like that, and make sure that your pattern side is on the inside. So you want to fold one over the other. Pop them under your needle and your foot. Take that pin out. Go forward a few stitches. And then we're going to go backwards. And then straight over to the end where that pin is there. Take the pin out. I don't know if you can see, there's just that little line of blue stitches, and that's where I want to stop. That's it, and then go backwards. There you go. That's your arm done. Now, what we are going to do is the two extra pieces which we had. I'm going to put my arm back out like that, out of the way. I'm just going to secure it with a pin so that it doesn't get in my way whilst I'm stitching. And then making sure you're on the inside of the fabric so that you should be able to see your seams, you want to take those two pieces which hang down there. I don't know if you can see, there's your arm piece and there's the two other pieces. Okay, and you want to take those two pieces and you want to take the two back pieces and pin those like that, and the 2 front pieces, and you're going to pin those together like so. So you've got a nice piece like that with those seams nestling nicely together, and then we're just going to go across the top and pin them in place. I should be able to get away with 3 pins here, I think. And then we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew right across the top of that, putting a back stitch on this end and a back stitch on this end. Back stitch. And there we are. Okay, let's have a look at that. Hopefully we haven't stitched under the arm. We haven't. There you go. So your arm can come out through there, and you've got a lovely piece joining on to there, like just like that. Okay, and we'll do exactly the same with the other side. So that's our bodice finished. It's all ready to go. So I've just done a little back stitch on this one. What I wanted to show you is, look, I've put my stitch in the wrong place. I need to make sure that the stitch is running on that very edge there, because that's where my skirt hem is going to be. So I'm just going to move it over so that it's just, I can just see the top of it. And I've noticed I've just put my pins in the wrong way around. So when you put your pins in, you'll need to put it in going like that. So I'm just going to, I've done a little back stitch already, so I'm just going to sew straight to the end, doing just a tiny back stitch there. And then I'm just going to go straight to the end. So there you go, I've stitched all the way to the end. So now what we're going to do is, I've got these 2 side pieces, one on this end and one on the other end, and we're going to do exactly the same as we've just done. Little back stitch there, sew straight down, and a little back stitch there just to finish it off. So for this next part, so I've stitched all those bits on the side, both sides. And for this next part, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we've got a nice long thread on the end of the machine. And then we're going to pop our fabric on, and we're going to get it so that the top of the fabric is just touching there. And then what we want to do now is take our machine, and we want to turn it into a much bigger stitch. So if you have a look, I'm still on the straight stitch, but here I'm going to take my stitches up to number 7. I was on number 4. So now we're going to be on number 7. This will give me a wider stitch, because I'm going to do a gathering stitch so that I can gather the skirt up. Okay, so this is what we would call a tacking stitch. So I'm just going to run along here and do a whole row of tacking stitches. So when you get to the end of the row, don't put any back stitches on it, because you don't want it to go on a back stitch, because if it does, you'll find that you can't gather it properly. So we're going to do a gather stitch, and what we're going to do now is cut it so you've got a nice long end on it, and we're going to go back to the beginning again, and we're going to put our second row of stitches on here, but we're just going to put it just slightly so you can see the row of stitches here. We're going to want our second stitches to go just along here, and we're going to do exactly the same, a row right to the end of just tacking stitches. So we'll slide it in. So that's our 2 rows of tacking stitches done along the top. I'm just going to put that to one side for a minute, and we're just going to come back over here and turn our stitch length back to 4 on mine, whatever you prefer to use on yours. So that's our bodice finished, it's all ready to go. And here we have our skirt, which we've already got the tacking stitches in. And what we're going to do is just tie a knot in this end here. Just a simple, I don't know if it's a granny knot, is it? Whatever it is, knot. And we're just going to, whoops, pull that tight there. And then on this end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the 2 top pieces of thread. So I'm going to pick those 2 pieces up. And what we need to do is to take this skirt and we're going to make it the same size as our bodice. So when our bodice is laying flat on the table like so, we're going to gather this skirt around until it's the same size, and we do that by just gently pulling with the strings here and moving our gathers all the way along that fabric. And we want nice even gathers. We don't want like no gathers or hardly at all here and then a big bunch of gathers. We want to get it nice and even. And when you've done that and you've got it the same size as your skirt, or your bodice, sorry, you're going to take your bodice and turn it so that it is facing that way. And you're going to place your skirt along your bodice and you're going to pin evenly all the way along, making sure that is touching that very edge there and this side is touching that very edge there. And you're going to have a lovely row of pins going all the way along. So just a few things to look out for whilst you're pinning. Just make sure you've got both of those underneath pieces of bodice together and pop your pin in, catching both of them. And you see here that sort of gather had gone underneath. You don't want that to happen because you might have a piece of fabric then sticking underneath where you're going to do your stitches. And now I'm just going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew straight the way across. But what I want to do is, can you see my line of stitching here? I want to make sure I go just underneath that 1/4 inch. So I'm catching all those stitches on this side of it. Okay. So this time I've just laid it on and I'm making sure that as I'm putting it on, I'm making sure my hand is pushing those gathers downwards. We don't want a big piece coming up this side. And I've just come, as you can see, I've just got a tiny bit of fabric just there. Come on, do a back stitch this time, making sure that your your stitches are on number 4 or your normal stitch. Okay. So my bodice is now attached to my skirt and it's laying quite nicely all the way along. What I want to do is just go along and check that there are no tacking stitches coming through the fabric. If there are, you can just take a quick unpick and push it into the little stitch, pull that stitch out and you'll have a nice clean edge along there. Do the same with your sleeves, where your sleeves were put in, because remember we did put tacking stitches in those. If you can see any, just pull them out. Don't think I've got any coming through. No, that looks nice and clean. So that's your dress tied to that. Now we're just going to move down here now. Okay, can you see we've got the piece which we folded over, and then we've got this piece here which is just the raw edge. What we're going to do is we're going to lay that down. You'll do it on your table and place the 2 pieces of hem at the bottom together, and then you're going to run those up and that should marry up quite nicely. We're going to join them together. We're going to put the pin into that seam because we want that to lay beautifully together there. Okay, and then we're going to come up and where this joins here, I'm going to pin all the way along here, and where this joins here we're going to put a pin in at the end of where that joins together. Okay, so we're going to start here and we want that nice edge together, keeping it on a 1/4 inch. I'm going to slip my pin out. I'm going to keep hold of it and then I'm just going to very carefully go in. Don't worry about that noise, that's just my machine telling me that I've got to cut the threads when I use the embroidery tools. That off, back stitch, and then all the way up to that line. And a little back stitch there and then bring it off. Okay, that behind. What we're going to do now is change our foot, because what we want to do next is to do a zigzag stitch. So we're going to take this foot off. I've got a little lever in the back of my machine here, and when I press that, my foot will just drop straight off like that. Okay, and then I'm going to put my other foot, which has got a much wider mouth. Can you see the mouth? This is the mouth bit here. So that's going to be a much bigger hole for the stitches to come on. And then I'm going to lower that foot on to there. Okay, and then lift your foot up again, take your thread and pass it underneath. Okay, and that is all ready now to do my zigzag stitch. We don't want to do a zigzag stitch with this one, because as it goes from side to side it would catch on the metal, and I don't know if you can see the little grooves in there where before I've forgotten to take that foot off and I've actually caught the foot and broke my needle. So we don't want to use that one. And I'm going to come over here, and my stitching at the moment is on a number 1, which is my straight stitch, and this is my zigzag stitch here, which is a number 7. So I'm just going to press that button and that will change it there. Make sure that's on the 4 there. And we're going to take our piece which we've just done, and this will just keep it neat. This will stop. Can you see all these ends here which are coming off? These tend to fray off. This will stop that from happening. And then what we're going to do is we're going to place our foot onto it so that that's in the middle. You don't have to worry about getting it in your 1/4 inch or anything. You want it in the middle of that hole. And we're going to go, and if you watch, the needle will go backwards and forwards along there. Okay, and you can do back stitch with this as well if you want to. And then forward again to here. Now what I like to do here, because this is the part of the dress which is going to get pulled a lot by the children taking it on and off, is I like to just hold it there for a second and let it do a good few stitches where it joins together. I find then when the children are pulling at it, this is nice and secure. Okay, so we'll take that one off. Okay, and we're going to do exactly the same now. Run the whole thing just as we did when we were putting the fabric on to do our the stitch on the skirt. We're going to just pop it on there, but we don't want our needle going down into where that stitching is. Okay, and we're just going to do a quick few stitches when you're trimming off your edges, and then we're just going to zigzag for a little back stitch, and then go all the way to the end with that zigzag stitch. Okay. So it's all done all the way along. Now if you're fussy like me, what you can do is just go along and cut off any ends, any loose bits of thread, and just neaten it all up. Right, okay, I'm going to turn my dress the right way round and lay it flat with the back facing up. So this is my back of my dress. Okay, so we're going to cut that there, and then I'm going to measure my other, I shouldn't really be using those scissors, but never mind. And I'm going to measure that one there and cut that one the same. There we go. Okay, and then we're going to place the loops down on that side and stitch right across that. When you go back to your machine, what you need to remember is that you were working on a zigzag. Okay, so you want to come back and put it on that straight stitch. Get that nice and taut, and then drop my foot down. Wiggle. If it doesn't go right, you know, pick it up and do it again, and then pop your needle into it. Okay, I'm going to hold it in place just for a moment with that pin, and then I'm going to do a back stitch, and then I'm going to come up very slowly, keeping that on that line. Okay, I'm going to remove my pin, keep my finger on there, and then slide that in through. Right, now I am going to do a back stitch here, and now we're going to do this one. Now this one is slightly harder. This is the loop and it's the plastic size, so we're just going to take our time with it. That's better. Can you see? It's actually going in there. Just take your time. I'm trying to keep my arm out of the way as well. So usually I would have my hand here when I was doing it. I'm just trying to sort of keep it back out the way a minute. And that should fit beautifully onto there. Just like that. And there you've got your back. Oh, that's quite pretty with the velcros there. And that's the back of your dress, and that's your dress finished. So this is the back of my dress. I'm really pleased with it. It's looking really nice. I would just now go and put a very cool iron on it to press it into place, and I would check it over for any bits of thread. And that's the front, so it's looking really nice and laying really nicely. So this is my finished witch's dress. I hope you like it. Goodbye.